How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I have got a very special guest for you. Today, I'm joined by the CEO and co-founder of Output Sports. Today, I am joined by Martin O'Reilly. How are you doing?
Doing really well, Stephen. Thanks a million for having me.
No worries at all. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. What's been happening in your world? What have you been up to recently?
Yeah, so Output launched last year. The last summer really has been great for us. We've been building the technology month on month, taking feedback from the end user base or like strength and conditioning coaches and physios. And yeah, the last few months have been super exciting because with sports starting to return post COVID, we've onboarded Premier League teams over in the US. But excitingly for us, like we're also starting to see great usage with like gyms and clinics and even schools as well. So like for us, it's a combination of really excited about the R&D and the tech we're building over the summer and ongoingly, and then also just starting to see the user base really loving it. So it's been a great couple of months and really excited for what's coming ahead as well.
Oh, cool. I know obviously, with things on sort of the up, I think probably people listening will probably get fed up about COVID being mentioned and everything, but over the last year or so, did that change your plans slightly, just on a little bit of a tangent? Because I like to ask that question because especially being a coach myself, working in the gym, everything kind of stopped. And then it's a case of obviously, following you on social media, everything kind of blown up in terms of the teams and the sports that you're working with. Did you have to change tactics a little bit, or was it actually kind of a blessing in disguise that it gave you a little bit more time, like you say, to work on other things that you might not have been able to?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think for us we had really strange timing. So we launched in February last year, and up until then, three of us have been doing research for like about 7 or 8 years. So it's been a long time coming to get to a point where we had a product. And then we made our first hires. They came into the office. They were just getting started, and then we sent that typical email being like, prepare for the worst but expect the best kind of thing. And I don't think any of us thought the worst would be that we're still predominantly working remotely a year and a half later. So we've completely done a different plan to what we had initially intended when we launched. So first and foremost, like everything's been done remotely. So we've mainly been kind of building the tech with our team, but dotted around the country. And then also like all of the business development and all of the kind of feedback from end users and iteration on the technology has been done over Zoom, which is so different to what we were doing prior to launching, going to conferences, visiting sites, and really getting to have face-to-face meetings and show the tech to people, not over a screen share in its kind of physical presence. So the whole thing has been completely different to what we expected. I think the best thing it's allowed us to do is kind of like focus on the technology and the end user. So we have a really exciting kind of tech pipeline coming for next year. And I have a feeling that might have been in 2 or 3 years' time had the pandemic not hit, because we really wanted to focus on what we could control, which we felt was the brand reputation, but more importantly, how that's developed through the technology. So we really went into like innovation and development mode, which is super exciting now that it will come to the fore probably early next year.
Yeah. Oh, cool. I bet that's a good feeling as well with everything being over Zoom, because I know for me, getting back, and training people in person, I bet that's a good feeling, taking, and presenting to, other places actually in person.
Yeah, like because I really can't wait now. I just got my second vaccine last week, so my EU passport or COVID passport activates today, which is really exciting. It's been so surreal, like teams taking it up in the MLB and the NBA and the Premier League, and then like onboarding them over Zoom and like not getting to experience these sites that like you thought about for so long about building the technology for. So I actually just can't wait to meet some of the end users face to face and build out the network in person again. Now we'll do it safely and slowly, but it is just going to be so nice. And even like our whole team haven't met each other yet, so like soon that will be able to happen, and we'll do something social and go out and play a bit of sport or something. But there's all these things that we just haven't done yet, which I can't wait for.
Yeah, but like kids at Christmas, it'll be right. We're going to be able to play around with this and do this. Oh, good. Um,
Yeah.
so obviously, there's a couple of questions that I had in mind about output sports, but for yourself and for everyone listening who might not know your background, prior to sort of creating output, just want to give a little bit of background to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So, basically, as a person, I'm just mad into like maths and problem solving, but also sports. So, like, would have played every sport under the sun at a fairly poor level growing up. So, where I went into college was called Sports and Exercise Engineering. It focused on the one side on like S&C and biomechanics, but more importantly, in terms of my next phase in like programming and electronics and that type of thing. So, from that, I got mad interested in what wearable sensors could do to analyze S&C predominantly. This is back in 2012 when really only Fitbits were doing step counting and kind of very high level analysis of exercise. So then I did a PhD focusing on machine learning to basically get the most out of a single sensor for exercise analysis. And in that, I became an assistant lecturer in biomechanics and sports science and exercise through the lifespan. So effectively, I kind of had an academic career for about 5.5 years, a PhD followed by postdoc. But it all kind of culminated in Output Sports because I was collaborating with my co-founder Dara Whelan, who's a practitioner, and he was really focused on making the most of it for the end users, and I was focused on making the most of the algorithms, and then it kind of led to the foundations of Output. So yeah, academically was just really interested in the whole area of S&C, sports science, but also how like technology could be made more easy and usable to still give great data to coaches.
Yeah, just touching on that, and with the build up to the creation of output, and you mentioned there about problem solving. With output coming together, what did you feel as though was the gap in terms of sort of sport and exercise science, and what output could add towards sport and exercise science? Because doing sports science at uni myself, there's other things that you can use and you get taught at uni. However, because actually one of the coaches in the gym, we've used output before, and it's kind of different to things that in a lab and everything like that, because obviously we can attach it to the bars, and it makes it a little bit more easily usable. So what was sort of the thought process behind it to try and add something to the world of sport and exercise science?
Yeah, so I think that the really pivotal moment, because I really enjoyed working in academia, and the really pivotal moment that we were like, there is a gap here and we have the team to go after it, was after we finished the PhDs. We spent a couple of months really like getting out and interviewing a lot of S&C coaches, physios and sports scientists. And whether that was at like the very top level of international soccer, or whether that was someone owning a clinic and trying to do best practice, we heard three problems coming back time and time again. So one was either access to or the reliance on like a range of cumbersome and expensive equipment. So if you had it, it was causing a lot of data management and analysis kind of time and effort that was really cumbersome and difficult. And then of course, if you didn't have it, you were reliant on maybe more subjective processes like visual analysis and so on. So, and then the last thing that was kind of, they were all saying, is I don't actually have enough time to get what I want out of the data. So our technology at that time didn't solve that problem. We very specifically at that time looked at movement mechanics in compound exercise like squats, running, deadlifts and so on. But we saw like with our approach and with our team and with wearables and video analysis, we had the foundations to really go after solving those things. So to make things much more integrated and efficient, highly usable. But of course, what everyone liked about those technologies is they're accurate, valid, reliable. And that's where we thought our process could really do something. So that was when I was like convinced, okay, actually, let's build something commercial here and really, really go after it. Because in another life, I could have been very happy working away in academia and just doing projects after each other. But this has been a really exciting route so far.
Yeah, you can see that when you're explaining it, that you're really invested and excited about what it's using there. And one thing that you did mention, speaking to top level coaches and sports, but also, which I think is quite good, is also coaches, who may be working in just a standard gym or a standard strength and conditioning gym. Was the focus, when you spoke to those coaches, to have something to work across the board, or was the focus actually right for the maybe mid-level coaches who have a few athletes, like the gym that I'm in, for example, or was it a case of, or actually for actually the higher level sport, this could be actually quite useful?
Yeah, so after we did the interviews, we kind of saw that there was an opportunity for both. And to date, like about 50% of our customers are like elite sport or pro sport, I should say, and university sport. And then about 50% are like gyms and clinics. So for us, like we're like really excited by the fact that it goes beyond the elite level. One of the other motivations in leaving academia was to like bring that type of analysis to a much wider audience. So, of course, like we're really delighted to be working with these top teams and athletes. But as a team, we're like, if not more, definitely equally excited about the wider array of practitioners out there and how we can help them with the technology. Because it used to frustrate me, say, lecturing someone on force plate analysis or EMG or various tools, and then just kind of knowing that unless that student went into a very, very specific career direction, they may not experience that technology again. And that was another motivation to like build something that's a bit more accessible and scalable. And so, yeah, for me personally, and I think for my co-founders as well, that wider team of practitioners out there is super exciting.
Yeah, because I know from especially myself, sort of graduating from uni and doing internships in professional sport. Sometimes you don't have access to a lot of kit to use, and then when you sort of go off by yourself, it's kind of you just got to make do, and there's other things that maybe aren't as accurate trying to track data. So having something that's a little bit more accessible and actually having to be able to use data can be really useful in terms of how you're working with clients and with athletes. Touching on the more sort of pro and elite side of things, what has been the feedback in terms of the difference that they've sort of felt in terms of using this, and trialing it out and sort of committing to using output a little bit more?
Yeah, there's been a couple of key areas, and it's been really interesting for us because on the one side, the all-in-one nature and the fact it's so portable is just useful for like sports that travel a lot. So like basketball, soccer, international athletes, preparing for the Olympics, going to various camps and so on. So the portability is a very kind of simple reason it resonated with some people. But then what's actually been interesting and maybe less expected for us is like there's certain measurements in the system that have really resonated with different sports. So for instance, we have a very accurate kind of flexibility measurement tool, and the fact that we have an open API that can feed into other systems means that it's just really sped up basic screening testing that previously would have required a goniometer and writing it down and typing it up later. That's now just automated and it saves time. So the fact the systems like can go anywhere with the teams or athletes, it can power remote coaching if needed, but also the fact that it saves times in traditional quite manual tasks seem to have been what have really resonated at that top level. And then also just the fact that it's interchangeable with other technologies. So like, if you're using an OptoJump or a force plate for jump height, our data will agree very highly with it. So if you have an academy feeding into the senior team or so on, that data gives you a nice long-term athlete development profile. Whereas, if you're using other technologies, they might mismatch, which can be problematic. So yeah, those things have definitely resonated. And one of the things as well that we're delighted with is the ease of use as well. The fact that the athletes can drive the testing themselves. So there's lots and to be honest, we're always constantly listening to the end users as well to make sure that experience gets better and better.
Yeah, definitely. I know from using it in the gym that I'm in, especially force and power development, it definitely gives the clients and athletes a little bit of intent when they can see that number when they're training, which sometimes from a coach's point of view, you talk about intent and trying to move the bar as fast as you can and all those things, whereas I think on some level everyone's got a competitive side. So to see that number, it's kind of like its own motivational tool to be like, right, this is where we're going to go. It's still sort of on the pro side of things. obviously from speaking with friends and other people that I've worked with who are in professional sport, did you find any challenges when you were going and presenting to these governing bodies, to these teams? Because I know there is a case of, there might be coaches there who've been there a while and right, this is how we do things. And was there sort of any obstacles or barriers coming up when you were saying, look, maybe this is a different approach or a different piece of kit that we can use, which is going to benefit you, rather than, oh no, well, this is how it's done. This is what we're going to stick with.
Yeah, no, great question, and there certainly is. One of the, I think, hardest things in the first place is actually getting a chance to meet these teams. They're obviously insanely busy people with very high workload, and that's one of the problems we're trying to solve for them. So that's what one problem is, actually just getting a chance to speak with them. And then it's when you're coming in with something that's quite radically different, it's convincing them that it's legitimate, it's authentic, and it does what it says on the tin. And that's quite hard when you can't travel to them and spend a half day with them, walking them through the technology and its usage. So it's been great. We've kind of seen like a network effect that, okay, when a certain Premier League team is using it, other ones go, okay, that's worth looking at. But it's just overcoming those totally legitimate concerns of like, is it accurate enough? Will it actually work in our environment? Does it do what it says it does, and so on? Which is much easier to convince them when we can actually go meet them and talk through the research and talk through all of the technology in person. But luckily, what we're starting to see is that's mitigating as the tech's out there for longer, and more people are learning about what it does. But certainly, it's a challenge, and one that we're always kind of learning from and trying to improve in terms of getting in front of more and more teams.
You mentioned there at the start of the chat about, quite a lot of different sports. Has there been certain sports that have been a little bit more reluctant to get involved, rather than, obviously, you mentioned quite a lot of, Premier League teams and other sports? Is there some sport? Because I know for me, having a powerlifting background, it's been quite useful, to see how fatigue levels are, the speed of the bar is slowing down. And it's a little bit more engaging how the session is. Obviously, as well with the team sports, which the other coach that uses output, as well as the football teams that you've mentioned about. Is there other sports that maybe have been a little bit reluctant who you've spoken to?
Do you know what? Like, prior to launching, I really thought it might be like there's certain sports where they're so clearly big into S&C at the moment, and they've seen over a decade or a decade and a half how it's changed performance. So like an obvious one would be American football or rugby. And I thought that they would be the ones that would be, most resonating with the tech initially, and they have been, thankfully. But what's actually been fantastic to see is I think there's now like a real, but beyond even technology, but like just a real appreciation of what S&C can do for performance in sports where traditionally it might be less applicable. So not kind of disregarding all of the skill component of any of these sports, but like, for instance, Olympic handball would be one that I play, that we've got some really nice end users in. Figure skating, like even like volleyball and stuff, where like now S&C is really rising to the fore, and they have an equal appetite for data that helps the S&C processes as the sports where you kind of intuitively know S&C has been a big part of it, like, track and field, rugby, and American football. So I actually haven't, I couldn't think of a sport where there's not like a really nice current kind of appreciation of the importance of athletic development and injury prevention, and therefore S&C. And then that just links to us as a technology. I don't think it's anything to do with us, if you know what I mean. It's more just the way people are starting to appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm quite glad you mentioned that, because I've had this conversation, with coaches and clients. I think across the board, yes, there's the main sports like what you mentioned, who that they have strength and conditioning. That's like part and parcel of it. Whereas for other sports, you might just think, oh well, they just rock up on a Thursday night train and then play on a Saturday. Whereas I think a lot of sports have just, even though they may be amateur, they have stepped up their level of professionalism, and people are realizing that, right, actually, we need to actually have some data. We need to have, even if it's the bare minimum. It's the same as for powerlifting and weightlifting. Gone are the days where it's like, yeah, eat whatever you want, do every single, go home, and then come back and do it again.
Yeah.
I think everything has just stepped it up a little bit. Like, you know, a couple of things that you mentioned there in terms of, you know, injury prevention and rehab and all those sort of things. And then flipping it on its head, I know we've mentioned about the elite side of things, on sort of maybe the middle level and the coaches who are trying to get involved in S&C, which might be interns or anything like that. What's been the feedback from that, the benefits that they've found, and how that's actually being able to impact their coaching and I don't want to say lower level, but, you know, the athletes who are aspiring to progress a little bit more?
Yeah, no. So there's some really exciting things at that level, and one is like just the athlete buy-in that the coaches now create. So, you know, there's such a diversity of measurements that output has, but say if you have a training block and a specific goal, you might be able to attribute like 3 outcome goals based on output measurements, and then that longitudinal tracking of that progress, where, you know, day to day you might traditionally not know if you're on route or not, has been one thing. So like athlete buy-in, athlete engagement, and then, you know, client retention that stems from that at that level, which is fantastic. The other thing actually is one that you mentioned, which is the intent, and like with intent, kind of athlete learning. So kind of realizing, okay, power is the velocity versus the force I'm producing, and I need to be focusing on that, you know, rather than lumping as much weight on the bar or that type of thing. So athlete learning, athlete intent in the sessions, and then buy-in, and then subsequently for the coaches, that's kind of like creating like I guess like a bit of a data-driven, I wouldn't call it data-driven culture, but like a data-informed culture for the athletes, and they can really see their progress, which actually that really excites us in our team, and we're going to add more and more features to make that as seamless as possible as well in terms of goal setting and tracking in the future. But that's definitely been the thing. And then from the coach's point of view, it's just having it all in one. So then, you know, whether it's that they're doing a screening session on balance and flexibility, or they're doing a power and speed session on sprint times, lifts and or sign jumps, that they can just do it all with the one tech and view it in the hub, I think has saved them a lot of time, and then also obviously money and that type of thing. So yeah, I really love seeing it at that level, where it's someone trying to get to the next level, be it with their business as a coach or as an athlete, you know, trying to get into the college level or trying to get up to the next level of their team and so on. It's really exciting for all of us to see that.
Yeah, we touched on it a little bit beforehand in terms of, you know, coming out of uni and not having that kit to use, and as well, you know, I know we mentioned about the sport in terms of, you know, developing S&C, but as a coach, I think that adds in, you know, a level of professionalism, if you like. You know, if you've got clients coming towards you, and you're mentioning, look, you know, this is how we're going to track things. Is that something that you kind of thought in the background, or did that just happen, you know, naturally? Because, you know, straight away, especially, you know, myself, you're going to be looking at things about, right, how can I improve my coaching, which isn't just learning the academic side of things, but also, you know, at the end of the day, as a coach, you're a product, if that kind of makes sense. You're selling yourself to be like, look, this is how I can get you from point A to point B. Like I say, was that a byproduct of, you know, your thought process of being able to track data, or was it something that you took into account as well?
No, so I think the best guy to answer this question would be my co-founder, Dr. Darwin, who's a sports physio originally. And his PhD looked at some kind of, shall we say, more subjective ways of rating exercise that would be quite common at the clinic and gym level. So visual assessment of movements, labeling squat technique, deadlift technique, lunges, and so on. And he published a paper that basically showed practitioners, whether they were highly qualified, and that means that they've been in the field for over 10 years, or students, actually had poor agreement with each other and just labeling, for instance, if technique was good or unacceptable. So that kind of showed that there is an issue with subjective rating of assessment. And then what actually was really interesting was they got the same people to label the same videos a month later, and they actually only had moderate agreement with themselves. So it kind of just showed that they're, like don't get me wrong, coaches at all levels are doing really great work, but just in that assessment piece, there's a real need for objectivity. And a phrase that goes around a lot at the moment is like, if you're not assessing, you're guessing. And like Dara, as a physio who had spent years doing visual assessment, I think really saw this as a motivating factor to build a technology like ours throughout his PhD and since as well. So yeah, it was actually quite deliberate, and I think it's been one of the nice things for us as well, as both on the physio side and the S&C side, that we do feel like we're providing useful data that otherwise wouldn't be there, or traditionally might have required you to go to a lab or that type of thing. So no, it's very deliberate, but mainly because of Dara, if that makes sense. I was more of an engineer, just loving building the different bits and creating the data, but he absolutely made sure that was part of the reason we built it.
I know you mentioned that with the physio side of things. I know we've spoken a lot about the S&C side of things, but on a kind of a tangent, and you mentioned 50% is pro sports and college 50%, lower level. How has that been with, in terms of physios working with elite sports, or even sort of, we've spoken about coaches on that lower level. This might be a little bit of a tangent that we're going on, but yeah, you kind of reminded me and opened up something else there in terms of physios, because I literally had this conversation a little bit earlier in terms of trying to maybe not blend is the right word, but have the S&C and the physio world work together. A prime example, working with one of the coaches that I work with, and it's two very contrasting thought processes from the physio and what the S&C would do in terms of their rehab. Whereas actually those two worlds, it's much better if they work together as a team. And how have you found that, obviously from your background and the other co-founders' background, and merging those together so that you can have a bit more of a positive impact on the physio world, if you like?
Yeah, I think for us, like, one of our key kind of values as a team is interdisciplinary approach. So we'd have like obviously data scientists, engineers, S&C people, sports science and physio. And I think it's really important to get different perspectives to solve problems and develop solutions. And then on the flip side, for the end user base, particularly at that pro and college level, but also beyond, one pain point that came up in those interviews was the extra silos of data that where physios were sort of semi-replicating what S&C coaches do, and then there was kind of, like you say, disjointed goals and process. So that's one of the things that we're building towards as well, is really trying to like make sure that they can all be on the same platform, getting value out of the same measurements and the same sort of data and communication. But we see some pro teams that are like, really, really exceptionally good at having the performance team heavily integrated across rehab and athletic development, and even having roles specifically bridging that. And obviously that's a luxury in some environments, but I've certainly seen it working really successfully for tying S&C and physio together. And then on our side, yeah, I can't stress enough like how different sorts of expertise and collaboration leads into what we build.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's sort of, where everything has to go, because, there is that thought process of, trying to step on people's toes. Like, how far does an SC go in terms of working with the physio, and how far does the physio in terms of stepping into the S&C world? So having, that collaboration together, but then also making sure, right, okay, this is the divided line, if you like, in terms of the crossover. With the physios working with clients and being able to collect that data, because that's a whole different area. I've never worked as a physio or anything like that. Was that actually something new in that field, in terms of actually having some software to use? Because a lot of it is like physical manipulation and just looking sometimes, rather than having an actual system and be like, right, okay, this is everything that I've got there.
Yeah, no, so like there's definitely technologies in physio, and it would definitely be less prevalent than the ones in S&C that were providing some data points during rehab or during it, but typically they were only used by, like, say, like very upper end physios or that type of thing. So that kind of all in one nature of what we do has just really, really helped us get into that physio market and provide value to the physios there as well. So the fact that they can now kind of mitigate that issue that you hear of when people are going to physio repeatedly and not knowing their progress and not knowing they'll be back. They can set key markers of performance. So taking an ankle injury as an example, might be balance and mobility for the early stages, building up to symmetry and building up to original baselines. Then you might focus on strength endurance and some of our strength measures around the ankle complex. And then ultimately moving on to like jumps, reactive strength index. And then even beyond that, we actually have a gait analysis for contact analysis during traveling jumps and running and sprinting. So you can just put numbers behind the whole process, which I think really it is quite new for clients of physios, and then of course new for the physios to be implementing it. But really, but with Dara's input as well, it's like really something that we're delighted to see the tech being used in, because such a good fit for what they actually are doing as a process, just to put numbers behind it,
Yeah, definitely. Because I know sometimes, you can have notes put down and all those sort of things, but to actually see that improvement, because sometimes just having, that, just looking and then seeing if it's got better, there's always going to be human error. So having actual numbers behind it, even if the client isn't sort of, I know we touched on intent in terms of moving the bar faster, but in terms of the physio world, if you like, if they can feel the improvement, but then you've got the numbers to actually see, because I think we're getting better rather than just having that subjective view, if you like, from the physio side of things, and having those numbers there to be like, right, okay, actually we can see from there. And again, going back to what we mentioned before, that level of professionalism, which I think people are going to look for, because I think especially at the lower end, when people are wanting to progress or get into a higher level, a higher league, or whatever it may be, get into academies, they're going to be looking for people who have had that, because they want to see, and then they can go to the teams and be like, look, this is what's actually happening. So obviously we've spoken a bit there about the ins and outs of using it as a coach. What's kind of what does the future hold for output, if you like? What are the further developments? And especially with it blowing up over the last couple of months, where are you looking to take output, and what further developments can we see or look forward to?
So it's a super exciting time for us, and one of the things that some people don't know about the company is like kind of the reason we're able to create the single sensor tool that does all these measurements is actually because of the data sets we built. So we had about 10 terabytes of data from 7 years of research that allowed us to create the algorithms to get all the measurements. So data kind of powers all of our tech and innovation, and now we have all our kind of anonymized end user data giving us this massive integrated performance set on global jump performance, bar velocity, balance control, and so on. So we want to unlock more and more value for the end user base, so that would be kind of powered through the anonymized data in the background. So for instance, we want to be able to aid coaches in creating personalized exercise programs informed by the data sets that are there, and providing talent ID models to professional organizations and bodies, so that we can do testing at scale and identify athletes with some talent that can be harnessed to success in the long run. And then also things like identifying novel factors that link to high performance or that link to injury risk, so that through exercise interventions can be moderated as well. So the other thing to say, there's some really basic ones. We have an iOS app coming out in the future. We've got a complete reskin of the whole system. So taking everything that everyone likes about version 1, but bringing in a whole lot of exciting stuff on version 2. And then with the hub, we're just about to launch a workout builder as well. So it's kind of like near term, getting those out there, can't wait for it. And then longer term, starting to add these more and more features around the system and the community and so on.
Oh, cool! I'll be looking forward to a couple of those developments then. I know at the start, and we've touched the whole spectrum of coaches. Do you think that the main bulk will start gravitating towards more pro sport, as more pro sport teams sort of an elite level sports kind of take on board what you're doing? Do you reckon it'll gravitate more towards that, or do you still kind of want to keep that 50-50 of the the coaches at the lower end, if you like, as well as the elite sport. Because like what we've mentioned before, there's benefits and it can impact across the board, you know.
Yeah, no, for us, like we really want to help athletes and coaches of all levels. So we won't be specifically holding on pro or ignoring them either for the long run. But I think like we are really excited by scaling top level sports science and process to new audiences and wider audience. So I definitely see us growing in pro sport and in college and so on, but also developing maybe even future products direct to athlete who would then link into coaches, be it digitally or in person. So we always are excited by, I guess that wider end of the pyramid of qualified practitioners and passionate athletes who are looking to achieve their goals. But at the same time, really, really find value and great learnings from working with the coaches at the top level. So, hopefully just this all of that is like such a huge opportunity to help coaches, and we want to do it at all levels.
Oh, cool. And as well, I think with things, opening up and the fact that you'll be able to travel a little bit more, I think that, opens up a lot more doors as well in terms of who you can actually, visit. And, there's always, the conversations that you can have over Zoom and on all those sort of things, but it doesn't beat it, actually using it in person and actually having some, practical use of it. So, that, like what we mentioned at the start, I bet that's an exciting prospect. Thanks a lot for taking the time to chat with me, Martin. Really enjoyed, picking your brains about, output. The last question that I like to ask from everything that we've chatted about there is, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom from what we've chatted about there?
So I think like probably the big one, because we're quite a new company, but even just in building the technology and having the success and that type of thing that we've had, it's probably back to that point we had about the interdisciplinary team and valuing different types of expertise. I was lucky enough to do a course recently in high performance and leadership. And I just found it fascinating, like things that we experience in Output were the same as huge companies, but then also the same as the pro sports organizations and the organizations we work with. So to me, like just like surrounding yourself with good people and then really believing in what you're doing is kind of core to where we're at, which is very, very early in the journey. But I think also applies to like being a great coach or developing as a coach, and then just always been open to learning both academically but also from your community. So they're just things we focus on at Output, and then hopefully that kind of resonates with the tech that people see out there as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think they're good values to go by in whatever industry that you're in. And listening to you speak about Output and the development of it, one of the first things that you said there was, you had 7 years of data. You listened and spoke to coaches in terms of what they're doing. So you had everything in the background, but then it's just changing it and developing it as you go. And it's good seeing the flip side of that in terms of developing a system and an app and things like that, rather than, because you say that as coaches, if you're the smartest person in the room, you need to go into a different room, you need to be learning and developing. And it's good to see that the data and the systems that you're using, they're developing and progressing as well. Because that's why I asked at the start, when you go into these S&C coaches, there can be a thought process of, oh well, this is what I do, this is how I've always done it. Whereas to get athletes better, to improve performance and challenge against other teams or other athletes, you need to be always pushing it a little bit. And, that's why I was, really happy that you were jumping on the podcast, because, it's good to see that everything's being pushed to develop things a little bit more. And it was really good to hear about other sports across the board taking in a bit of an investment in S&C across the board, whether it's, elite sport or people progressing from lower levels up, which I think are good values. And I think that was a good word of wisdom to finish on. For anyone listening who one might have any questions about what we've chatted about today, want to give Output a go or get involved with the technology that you've put together, where can people find you, ask any questions, or see the content that you put out there?
Yeah, so I think the best thing for anyone to do who just wants to see the technology that we've been speaking through is if you jump to our website, which is outputsports.com, there's a big request demo button, and either me or one of our sports scientists will hop on and just show you the technology and start a conversation. Beyond that, then, just for kind of like keeping in the loop of what we do, we're lucky enough to have at Output Sports on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn as well. So please feel free to follow us, and you can reach out to us via all the messaging channels on those as well. But yeah, we're always delighted to speak to new coaches and see if we can help them with our technology.
Awesome. For any coaches listening or athletes listening, having used the technology, myself, it's useful. And, one of the big things in there, if you feel as though you're not missing a little bit of intent in training, seeing that number. I know it worked for me, seeing that number, right, I need to get that up. It is really useful. So thanks a lot, Martin, for taking the time to jump on. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.